please?
Well, my name is Jean Augustine, and commonly known as Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine. I live in the constituency of Etobicoke Lakeshore, the constituency that I represented in the Parliament of Canada for 4 terms as a member of Parliament. It's interesting when someone asks what are the highlights in Parliament, because I usually say I've had so many highlights before I entered the Parliament of Canada. I had a whole life as an educator, as an administrator, as head of Metro Toronto Housing Authority, sat on various and varying boards, both national and provincial and municipal. I also know that it's important to mention that I was elected in 1993 after a lifetime in education. At the same time, when you ask about highlights in Parliament, I got to Parliament as the first Black woman, the first African Canadian woman elected to the Parliament of Canada. As a result of being the first, everything else that happened, it was like the first Black woman to be in a cabinet, the first Black woman to be parliamentary secretary to Prime Minister, the first Black woman to sit in the Speaker's chair to conduct the business of the House, the first Black woman to represent Canada in so many different places around the world. So these are all highlights. For me, was making my way, finding my way, having gone there with a passion to make sure that as an activist as I was, that I was going to make things fair and just, and I was going to look at the situation of our community and what could be done in the Parliament of Canada to help us as people of African descent in Canada. And so my motion to create, asking the Parliament to declare February as Black History Month in Canada was part of that passion. My motion to ask the Parliament of Canada to put the statue of the famous 5, the suffragettes, the famous 5 women on Parliament Hill, when only dead monarchs and statues of prime ministers were allowed on the hill. Getting my colleagues in the Parliament of Canada to address themselves to these social issues that I was passionate about. I consider that part of the success that I had in Parliament.
I couldn't have asked for a more beautiful answer, Doctor. That was wonderful. And I mean, congratulations on every step along the way. That's just an amazing.
All of this didn't happen, there were challenges, there were fall on your behind, there were pick yourself up. Mm-hmm. There was the whole issue of resilience and all of these things that were built into me as I grew up in Happy Hill, St. George's, Grenada. Well, we had great discussions when we knew that in the community, with historians and people who ensure that as a community we're well aware of our ancestry and what was happening with us, especially those of us who were educators. And so when we knew that anniversary was coming up, the the bicentenary of the abolition of the Slave Trade Act, was not ending slavery, but the act that said to the British merchants, you can't send out ships anymore and pick up Africans and bring them across. We had a meeting as to what we could do in Toronto, to commemoralize that, not celebrate, but to memorialize this abolishment. We had this big conversation, a whole group, maybe about 20-something of us. And then when we left at the end of the meeting, it was, what are we going to do and who has the necessary funds to do this? And because I knew and had some contacts within the Liberal Party, and at the time, I thought that I would approach the provincial government and ask if they would fund the community to do some memorialization. And again, making the case that we were not in the history books, we were not in the education modules. There was just so much our young people didn't know about that history and our history. And so as a result, I got the provincial government to agree to put on the table $1 million. So I headed and I was given the responsibility to put together a committee and to do some work and to show how we would spend that $1 million. And so we had a committee that was made up of many of the people who were museum keepers, people who were writing, people who were historians. And we met about once a month and we planned what we can do and how we should distribute that money. And we looked at 4 areas that we wanted to do some work around. One was education and young people. And so we gave money to organizations that had young people who would take them to Southwestern Ontario, who went to different, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and to different parts of Ontario where there was Black history. Another part was to work with educators to put some modules, some videos, and different scripts in the Ministry of Education teacher training. The third was really to work with community, talking about this. And fourthly, we set up almost like an art gallery, archive, a place where we bring people in, speakers, actors, museum keepers, to talk about that part of the history. And so we divvied up the money, $250,000. And that was how we spent this with really good support from the Ministry of Culture and Immigration at the time in the provincial government. It was David Peterson's government. And the discussion around, once we had Black History Month, and we now knew that from coast to coast to coast, the historians, musicians, entertainers, educators, everybody was doing something around Black History Month. The conversation came up around, emancipation. Because again, in some of the islands, especially those of us who were islanders, Emancipation Day was celebrated. I'm from Grenada, and Emancipation Day was a big holiday. And I know that in Canada, in Toronto here, there were different festivals that were held. And the Ontario Black History Society has stories of their members going to different parts of Ontario celebrating Emancipation Day. And so it was a big celebration, but it was not a national celebration. In a number of instances, lots of things happen in Toronto because we have a critical mass of African Canadians, but it does not mean that it's spread across the country. And so from 1995, there was talk that we should ask for Emancipation Day to be recognized just as we had Black history recognized. And so I know that Rosemary Sadler had started this, and there were conversations going on about emancipation and what can happen, and looking for commitments from politicians, from members of parliament to support this. And of course, it had been going back and forth with the discussions until it culminated with Senator Wanda from Nova Scotia, who is now in the Senate, to push that forward, supported by Ms. Jari, who is a member from Mississauga or Brampton. And so it really got some life into it. and we were able to get it passed, or it was passed. So we now at a point in time when we can say all across Canada, we are now going to be celebrating Emancipation Day. And so I want to take this opportunity to wish all those who will be celebrating, all those who have virtual and other ceremonies, I want to say Happy National Emancipation Day in Canada.